All righty. Welcome, everybody, to this week's leadership call. Thank you for the feedback, those of you that filled out Katryn's survey. That was useful information, and I was partially affirmed, so thank you for that. I want to recognize Yoris and Chenda and Eustace for being our top folks this week in the experienced category, and also our top first years, with Leo, whom I spoke to yesterday. He tuned in, and Lucille and Aaron. Ever productive. All right. So, welcome. Let me go now to my notes, and I will become a little more coherent. All right. This week, if you're taking notes, we are going to dive into a topic that generally doesn't generate discussion, simply because everyone agrees with the topic. We're talking about character, part 2. Character part 2, we're still in. If you're going, gosh, what are we doing? Well, we're working with developing the leader within you 2.0. And this is such a thick and pithy chapter. Pithy. You should use that word with your clients today. Pithy. When they say something, you can say, wow, that was a pithy comment. And they'll be confused, and your status will increase. Pithy means full of substance. Pithy. Okay, so this is a pithy chapter. And so I want to spend a little bit more time on it. And we're going to talk today about the 4 dimensions of character. So if you're taking notes, you're jotting down 4 dimensions of character. And then under each of these little headings, I'm going to this is so good, I might just read sections out of the book, which is, I know, a little bit lame, but it's good. He obviously says it better than I can. So let's jump in. Maxwell even steals from the best. He studied a book by an author named Irwin, who wrote a book named Derailed. He studied leaders that had gotten way off track. So he said that there were 4 dimensions of character that cause you to be on track. And one is authenticity. Authenticity, being authentic, being real. Write that down. A lot of leaders have a difficult time with authenticity. They don't feel like they can let down their guard, if you know what I mean. They worry that if they reveal their failures, then people will sort of say, well, he doesn't have any credibility. If they try to hide their failures, they come across as phony, because it's impossible not to mess up and make mistakes. If they hide their successes, then they feel like, oh gosh, I won't have any credibility with my people. But if they promote themselves all the time, then they come across as arrogant. So how do you do this authenticity dimension of character, you're asking? Well, let me help you. He says that there are really 2 lines in your life that you have to stay in between. There's the line of success when you're winning, right? And then there's lines of failure when you're messing up and making mistakes. And you have to stay within those lines. Most of the time, people live between those lines. So let me just read a tiny section. He says, when people see us on the success line, we have to be careful not to think that is who we really are. Okay? We can be like the athlete who wins the gold medal, or the team that wins the Super Bowl. And you start to believe that you're all that spectacular hype and good press that you're getting. That's who you really are. I mean, that's not reality. It says people may try to put such individuals on a pedestal, but they will surely fall off. And there are also times when we travel along the opposite line, the failure line. Who's done that? Raise your hand. Yes, you have. I was just seeing if you were paying attention. We all make mistakes. We all fall short. We all make bad choices. If that's who you believe that you are in reality, then you don't even want to get out of bed in the morning. So we shouldn't buy into that one either. Both of those lines, success and failure, are extremes. So we're neither as good or as bad as those might indicate. So here's a good line. If you're writing things down, here's a good one. Authenticity. And look, I put an orange line on it in my book. Authenticity is about living an open life between those lines. An open life between those lines. When I was young, I was really caught up in impressing everyone because I was good and people, and I liked winning awards and getting recognition. And I started to believe my own press. And so I was really absorbed with impressing people. Okay. So I wanted to walk away and have them say, wow, that guy was impressive. So I was caught up in that. And that's okay. I was young, whatever. You want to make a big splash with your life. But here's what you got to think. When you get older, hopefully you get a little more reflective. And I start to feel the opposite pull. And my goal now is when I'm with people, a lot of times I just want to share my failures, which really sounds weird. Why would I do that? So I can encourage people. So write this down. If you're a manager, if you're a partner, if you have a team of people that you work with, you need to remember this. This is not in the book. This is bonus material. This is one of my discoveries. We relate to each other through our weaknesses, not our strengths. You getting that? We relate to each other through our weaknesses, not through our strengths. I mean, when people were having a tough time, when I was coaching young people and university students at Southwestern, and they had a really difficult time with their selling season, they would come in at the end of that time period, and in my office, I put plaques on the walls and stuff like that, just because I didn't have anywhere else to put them at the time. So people never went in and looked at all my stuff and went, wow, this is really impressive. I can relate to this. No, a lot of them were like, man, I just had a horrible sales experience. I sucked. I'm super frustrated. So what would I do? I wouldn't sit and go, wait a minute, time out. Let's look at my plaques for a minute. Can you see those? Aren't those nice? No, I would sit with them and I would share my stories of how I screwed up my first attempt at selling and how I made mistakes as a manager. And so when you do that, when we can relate to each other through some of the things we fall short in, not our strengths. Okay? That's the truth. So I can encourage people through my weaknesses. And Maxwell says, instead of wanting to point to my breakthroughs, I want to direct people to the brokenness that has led to my breakthroughs. Did you catch that? So instead of wanting to point out all my breakthroughs, the big wins, he said, I want to direct people to the brokenness that has led to my victories. So sharing your weakness is a way to be authentic in the right proportion. Now, am I saying that when you call somebody on the phone, booking buddies, you should say, excuse me, before we begin, I'd like to share some of my shortcomings? No. If you're a clothier, you don't want to get in their office and say, hey, you know what? I've already made 4 big mistakes today. And so I want to just start off with that as we establish rapport. No, that's not what I'm saying. This is more to be mindful when you're in the office, when you're working with a team, when you're with a fellow teammate who's a little discouraged. This is the time you can kind of share with them. Max Lucado, one of my favorite authors, is highlighted in the book with a quote. He said, God would rather have us walk with an occasional limp than a continual strut. Right? So think about that. That's heavy duty. All right, that's authenticity. That's point 1. Point 2, the second dimension of character. And if you're just starting your day, if this is the morning for you and you're like, oh my gosh, this is some heavy stuff for the week. I'm just ready to go out and sell. Okay, that's fine. Shelf this, table it for later, discuss it with your team. I know this is heavy duty. That's okay. That's what I'm here for. Second topic is self-management. Self-management. And you guys have heard of IQ. That's one measure of intelligence. You've heard of EQ. That's your emotional intelligence, which hopefully we'll develop more and more of. And then there's also CQ, which stands for your character quotient. And self-management, which is point 2, is part of your character quotient. And one thing I like about Maxwell in this little section is he talks about the fact that everybody needs guardrails in their life. You know, if you're out driving your car and you're in the mountains, so you're kind of cruising through the Alps, for example, or Canadians if you're in the Rockies somewhere. And you'll notice that most of the time on those mountain passes around curves and things, where there's a sheer cliff, they have what? Guardrails. Yes. So what he suggests we do is build guardrails into our life with our character. Okay? Guardrails are formed with our values. So he says the best guardrails are the decisions you make before you face high pressure situations. Does that make sense? You make a decision based on your values before you get into temptation. And that's when you'll be better. Example, what are your guardrails? You ask yourself, what won't you do? That's a guardrail, you know? If you're, say for example, if you value relationships, right? Well, what won't you do when it comes to relationships and harming someone else, right? You have to have a guardrail built there because you can be tempted. So identify your values and decide boundaries you will not cross before you're tempted. So what I'm encouraging you to do, this is another thing to write down, is build your integrity, not your image. Build your integrity, not your image. Now you guys are doing a great thing by helping build people's image and saving them time by doing like world-class custom clothing, right? That is building their outsides, your clients' outsides, making them look good and be more effective. For your effectiveness as a salesperson and partner and leader, you've got to build yourself from the inside. You build your integrity, not just the outside, okay? So here are 3 questions I want to give you out of the book that I thought were good when it comes to self-management. The first one has to do with consistency. And these are great things to talk about or think about. Number 1, am I the same person no matter who I'm with? No, am I the same person no matter who I'm with? I know people that I used to work with when they were very young. They were like, yeah, they were with their peers, their sales. It was like going to a semi-annual meeting. They're like, party, woo, have a good time. And then they got promoted to the next level in the business, and they were in management. And guess what? They had to manage themselves differently than they did when they were 18 years old. We encourage that you got to be consistent. You can't like party hard with the boys and then suddenly change and be something different. Are you the same person consistently no matter who you're with? That's a good question. Here's a question, number 2, about choices. Do I make decisions that are best for others even when another choice would benefit me? Do I make decisions that are best for others even when a different choice would benefit me? In other words, am I putting others first? Or is it just about, I got to make the sale, right? And I got to say, I was bad at that too. I made bad choices in self-management. There were times I didn't know how to answer questions that clients asked me, right? Have you ever had that happen? They ask a question, technical question, you're like, I'm sure, yes, absolutely, we could do that. And you don't even know. Your head's up your butt. You didn't know anything. But I would say yes. And so I would violate that particular, I made decisions that would help me make a sale, even though it might not benefit the other person because it wasn't even true. It was bad. Okay, third question is about credit, giving others credit. Am I quick to recognize other people for their contributions to my success? Am I quick to give other people credit, or do I always take the credit because I'm feeling inadequate, or I want the limelight, or I want the credit? Have you ever had an idea, if you guys have worked in another business, if you had an idea that's really pretty good and you shared it with a teammate or your manager, and guess what? At the next meeting, they told the boss about it, and the boss says, hey, this Bill had this great idea. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, time out. That was my idea. He took credit, even though it was your idea. It's that's frustrating. So in this little section on self-management, I just want you to think, where are you susceptible to character pitfalls? And what decisions do you have to make before temptation hits? All of us have different areas of temptation where we can fall down. So you have to build in that guardrail before you reach it. You know, some of you might think, you know, I'm starting to freewheel here a little bit, but some of you might have a weakness when it comes to drinking. You know, that's your Achilles heel. Because once you start, you're like, oh, you can't stop, and you've fallen down drunk and you pass out. I don't know. But if you know that that's your big problem, then what you want to do is build a guardrail in where you don't put yourself in situations where it's going to happen. Okay? That's just smart. This goes back to character. Are you going to live a perfect life as a result of this call? No. You're still going to screw up. But this call should encourage you to manage yourself well. All right, point 3, humility. I know I'm going fast, but I know you've got other things to do. Humility. This section was so good that I want to read parts of it. May I? Everyone's muted. Yes. All right. A guy named Morneau wrote in a book called Humility, 31 Reflections on Christian Virtues. He said this, I like it. It is that habitual quality whereby we live in the truth of things. The truth that we are creatures and we're not the creator. The truth that our life is a composite of good and evil, light and darkness. The truth that our littleness, in our littleness, we've been given extravagant dignity. That's cool. So we're this mix, we're this compound of, we can do really good, but we can do really stupid, bad stuff to hurt other people. And we've all done that. Thomas A. Kempis, it says in the book here too, if you've ever read that philosopher, he says, don't be angry that you cannot make others as you wish them to be, since you can't make yourself as you wish to be, right? He lived a long time ago, so that's why he spoke a little bit funny. But he said, don't be angry that you cannot make others as you wish them to be, since you can't make yourself as you wish to be. So humility is a difficult thing to tackle because, I mean, you know, I know people, and I'm sure this happens to me, where you can get proud of your humility. Man, look how humble I am. Yeah. Everyone notice that? Yes, I'm truly humble. Well, hopefully you see the irony there and you're not writing that down. But when you see your flaws, when you're made aware of your flaws, what does it do? I've had some major mistakes in life. And if we're ever sitting around at a meeting, I might want to share a couple with you in full living color. But the deal is, when I have fallen down badly, what does that help me do? But I can either get seriously depressed and just wallow in that, or learn from it. And what have I learned? It helps me be less judgmental of other people. That's why humility is so good. That's why screwing up can be helpful. You can be thankful for your mistakes because it helps you hopefully judge other people less. It helps me be less accusing. It helps me be more understanding because I know, you know what? We're all traveling down the same road. We're all making mistakes, maybe of different colors and flavors and etc. But I'm just a beggar telling other people where to find food. Does that make sense? I'm not saying, look at me, I've got my game together, you don't, so I'm better than you. Not at all. I am just a homeless person showing people where to find shelter. And if you're like, well, what does that metaphor mean? I'm pointing people to God. I'm like, you can't give, and I've talked about that on my recording if you were at the semi-annual. It's just super important. So God humbles us because pride is the numero uno mistake when it comes to bumping up against God. So humility is a great thing. It's just hard to balance, okay? Here's what Dale Carnegie said right out of the book. Dale Carnegie's a little less spiritual, but it's good. If you tell me how you get your feeling of importance, I'll tell you what you are. If you tell me how you get your feeling of importance, I'll tell you what you are. Where and how we seek validation impacts our character. So watch for humility. So a couple questions on humility. I'm going to build these in. Humility. Here's questions you need to ask yourself. Do you see other people as things that usually get in your way? This happened yesterday. I'm all feeling proud about how I care about people, and a guy cuts me off in traffic. You ever had that happen? Just like right in front of me in his little Porsche, and I'm just like, you jerk. And I'm suddenly realizing, now, this guy may be on the way to the hospital to see his wife who's having an emergency. That would be a big paradigm shift, right? Well, he pulls in front of me. I immediately see him as a thing. This is a thing that has gotten in front of me and has inconvenienced me and pissed me off. So if you start to see other people as just things, or if you see clients as things like transactions, how many transactions can I make today to hit my goals because my goals are important, then humility goes down the tubes. Okay, so do you see other people as things or as people? That's a hard one, friends. Okay, here's another question under humility. Are you open and transparent about your struggles? Am I open or transparent about my failures? Or am I more concerned about looking good and having it all together? Everybody wrestles with that. And when I'm saying, again, share your struggles, I'm talking about kind of a one-on-one with somebody that's hurting, not just announcing it to the world. You've had people do that before that were a little bit too much information. The first conversation you had with them, you're like, whoa, 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 enough. Why are you sharing this? Too early. Don't know you. So you don't want to you have to have balance. All right, last point. Courage. Courage makes character possible. And I love what Maxwell says about this. He says, character is not developed in ease and quiet. Character is not developed in ease and quiet. Only through trials and suffering, he says, can our souls be strengthened. Is that true? How many of you noticed that some of the tough times of your life really taught you the most? Anyone? Like when you made mistakes or you had setbacks or just disappointment or sadness, you learned a lot during those times. I certainly learned a lot more, and those are the times I can tell stories about. I don't sit and share with people like on the next leadership call, hey, let me tell you about a time when I was winning and doing great, and I went to an awards banquet and people said really nice things about me. Then I went home and watched TV. Wow, what a day. No one would relate to that. Remember, we relate to each other through our weaknesses. But courage comes when you're tested, when you have trials, okay? Maxwell says when he reaches a point where he can't go on, and this is a quote, he acknowledges his weaknesses, he asks God and others to help him, and third, he summons courage to take action, which I like. So you'll reach a point sometimes where you just can't do it by yourself, and that's where you need to have help from other people. You've got to have courage to keep persisting through the grind. That's why we call it the grind. We don't call it the ease, right? Hey, welcome to LGFG. Let's experience the ease together. No, it's the grind. That's something everybody's got to go through, and that's a requirement. So I'm sorry, but I'm happy that you're doing it. All right, here's what I'm going to do before you unmute yourself and share any thoughts you have on this heavy topic. There's a little poem in here that I'll finish with. But first, let me let you do this first before we wrap up. Does anybody have a story or a thought or a question? Chinda had one yesterday. Anybody? Character, authenticity, humility, courage, self-management. Everybody mastered those? Yes, okay.
Yeah, I probably have one.
Okay, who's this?
Chris.
Chris.
Sorry, I'm driving right now, so sorry about that.
Okay, well, pay attention to the road, Chris. I just see you as user 001. So go ahead, user 001.
So basically with hockey and school, I basically always had things going for me. And you really don't realize what you're made out of until an injury basically sidetracked all of that. So I basically had to reinvent myself, kind of go back to what made things great without hockey. And that wasn't easy to do, but you realize how far you can grow from that. And yeah, you just realize what you're kind of made out of type thing.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, you're tested when you're injured, you know, and that's frustrating. You're just sitting on the bench going, I want to be well. So good. All right. So eyes back on the road. Pay attention.
I'm pulled over.
Okay, good. That's smart. All right. Anybody else? Last call. Okie doke. Let me share this story with you out of the book. And if you haven't gotten the book, it's even better than my calls. So imagine that. This is called The Mirror and Me. It says, when I look in the mirror, what do I see? Reflections of a double-sided me. One side is everything I ever hoped to be, yet my greatest problem is staring back at me. There are times when I rush out to get ahead and I find myself leading when I need to be led. Courage is needed. How can I overcome me? How can I lead others with authenticity? I will remember the best and worst in me. Doing this will help me growing humbly. I will seek others out more faithful than me and ask for help with my vulnerabilities. To lead and do right, that is my possibility. To do this, I will visit my mirror regularly. So what do mirrors do? They reflect, at least your outside image. It is a great thing to reflect on what we talked about today. Okay? So I wish you success today. If your day's over, good job. Have a fantastic week and month. We'll wrap up character next week. So thank you for tuning in. You guys are all winners. I appreciate you. See you later. Goodbye.